Welcome back. It's the 29th annual Phyllis Schlafly Collegians Summit. Great to be with you. Earlier I was telling our viewers and others throughout the year, we'll work with folks in different college campuses and from different backgrounds on issues that they're facing on their campus. If you'd like to be more closely tied to our work, please visit phyllisschlafly.com and track us down there. Also, during these programs and at any time afterwards, these will be put up on our website. If you have questions or comments, info@phyllisschlaflyeagles.com comes right into our email boxes. Also on Facebook, Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, Ed Martin Live, also on Facebook, and YouTube, Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. We're going to go now. We're going to do a bunch of this program we will be doing virtually to get access to experts on key issues that really we think matter. And our next guest is Todd Bensman. Todd Bensman is the National Security Fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies, CIS.org. He's an extraordinary investigator and a reporter, a journalist down towards the border, spends a lot of time at the border of Mexico and even further down into Latin America looking at what's going on. So first of all, welcome, Todd. How are you today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
It's great to have you, Todd. Different than a lot of times we've talked, and even we've had you be an expert at our Eagles events. We're talking to college students. Todd, why do you think college students should care about what I'd say is chaos on the border?
Well, for one thing, the mass immigration that is coming over the border is historic in nature. I mean, it's in scope and in diversity. And it's going to have a lot of long-range and medium-range impacts on your lives, on everybody's lives in the country. There's a financial, fiscal impact on taxes. There's impact on labor markets. There are impacts on housing, healthcare, every aspect of American life is going to be impacted by what's happening right now down at the border, just because of the sheer numbers of families and unaccompanied minors and really even single adults coming over that border right now on public safety, crime, terrorism. So if you care about your country, about what happens to it as a young American with a long future horizon ahead of you, you ought to pay attention to what goes on down at the border, in my opinion.
Todd, we're talking with Todd Bensman, and Todd's book is called America's Covert Border War, The Untold Story of the Nation's Battle to Prevent Jihadist Infiltration. I find the book so interesting to read now. It's a year and a half old or so, because we've seen so much happen at the border. It's almost like national security is forgotten to some extent, in a weird way. But tell these collegians, what's the reality at the border? What's happening at the American border today?
Regarding national security, or
what's the border look like in terms of what the Biden administration's policies are, the number of people? What's the actual description of what's going on every day?
Right. Well, it depends on where you go. But if you were to go to anywhere along the border in South Texas, from about Laredo south,
right,
you will be able to watch immigrants pretty much all day and all night pouring over the river, being crossed into the river. Right now, because it's so hot, they prefer to go at night, in the middle of the night, or at 3 and 4 in the morning. But you can also see them crossing during the daytime. These are going to be immigrants who are from all over the world. They're speaking all different languages. 40% of all the immigrants who have landed on the Texas side of the river are from places other than Mexico and other than Central America. They're from all over the world, Middle East, Africa. And so it's really interesting to kind of get a load of I was just down there a couple of weeks ago, and I met a bunch of Peruvians for the first time. I've met Mauritanians and Senegalese and Ghanaians and people from Guinea and you name it. They're coming across, and what you'll see is Border Patrol will be accepting these very passive turning themselves in, presenting themselves immigrants, and they'll be accepting them in directly from the cartels down there. They'll all have these wristbands that they had to buy from the cartels for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a piece. It's like buying a ticket to a water park or something,
Yeah.
An amusement park, in order to get on the raft across to show that you paid. They all have these wristbands. Even the infants and children have them on their legs. So you'll see that. And then the Border Patrol will just take them directly from the cartels and process them at a hard facility inland. And then you can go and watch them all day long get on buses. They're being released into the interior of the country by bus, by plane, charters, and they're going to all over the country. Pretty much every state in the union, and you can watch that conveyor belt happen. This is all done by design and by policy.
Todd, we're talking with Todd Bensman, Center for Immigration Studies, CIS.org. I'd encourage our collegians on this issue, immigration. There's been such a lack of education on the question. One of Todd's colleagues at the Center for Immigration Studies, Mark Krikorian, wrote a book about the case for immigration, why you should have a little or a lot. Real serious discussion, and what Todd covers is what's actually happening on the border. Todd, would you describe for me and for our collegians especially the contrast between the Trump administration and the Biden administration? I know you have an opinion on how poorly you think it's working out. You know, there's sex trafficking, there's drugs, there's national security threats. But I just mean the description of what they were doing under Trump, and it wasn't perfect, right? They didn't build the whole wall, but what they were doing, how they were using the system, the laws, and what's happening today. The contrast is stark, and it's not being covered by the mainstream media, not even by Fox News. And I will tell you that in the last 12 hours, a coalition of big donors has come to the Republicans and said, you're about to get back to power. What you need is to do more immigration amnesty, more immigration open controls. That's from the Republican Party. That's pre-Trump. But just give us a description of Trump and his period on immigration, as well as the Biden administration.
Yeah, well, let me start by explaining some basic physics of immigration.
Okay.
Because this is really what counts. Immigrants come to the border when they have 2 or 3 conditions in place. First of all, remember, they have to pay smuggling. It might cost $10,000 to come from Central America to bring your family.
Wow.
This is a fortune to spend on. You got to pay the cartels, you got to pay food and transportation and everything else, and it's an expensive proposition to make that decision. A lot of these are pretty poor families, and so they have to borrow the money. And so before any of these people lay down that kind of money, they want to know 2 things. One is, am I going to actually get across the border, A, and B, will I be able to stay inside the United States and work to pay that debt off and many multiples of that debt? It's a really basic calculus that you and me, we all make this calculus when we consider a job across the country, or pick a school to go to, or whatever it is. It's cost consequence. And so the key thing about getting into the country is, can they access the U.S. asylum system, which is the system that bypasses detention and deportation. So all they have to do is say, I declare asylum, if they get onto U.S. soil, and then they get into the country, and it's a 5-year wait before your case is even heard. So that's the game. The game is, can I get access to that asylum system and get in? So what Trump did was he built a series of policies that hit those opioids, those narcotic draws square on. So one of the policies, for example, was remain in Mexico, where you could apply for American asylum, but you're not getting in to wait that 5 years out because you'll disappear. We know you'll disappear. So you had to wait in Mexico. Well, guess what? They stopped coming. Nobody wanted to come for the great Mexican dream. Right. The other thing that they did, and it was brilliant, it hit right on the
incentive, the incentive of human beings, right? If you incentivize behavior, you're going to get more of it. If you put in a disincentive, you're going to get less of it. I mean, this is that you could say what you want about Trump. He seemed to understand that more than almost anything. It's kind of like the basics of human nature. And it's like Kim Jong-un, Chairman Kim Jong-un. The guy clearly just wants to feel like he's something big. And Trump said, "Oh yeah, you're huge, you're great. Just stop doing dumb stuff." And Kim Jong-un's like, "I like this action." So, all right, back to your point. So they changed the incentives. Now Biden comes in. What happens?
So Biden comes in, and so remember, that's what, if you're going to lay your $10,000 down, you want to get in and stay in for a long time.
Right.
Well, when Trump had all of those policies in, and they were like devious in the way that they really nailed that. I mean, right. I know this because I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of immigrants during the Trump era about these, and they're like, "I'm not spending the money to go to get stuck in Mexico or to get shipped back." They would say it.
Right.
And what happened was Biden came in and he restored all of the incentives in full, like every possible. I mean, it was they just put a golden chalice, prize money, everything that you could. They threw corn to the deer. They chum the waters. They put. I mean, they literally. I mean, they just did everything that you could possibly do, and the immigrants were like, "Wee!" I mean, they spent the money, and they are coming because the other thing is that all of these immigrants have cell phones, and they're fully connected to social media. And as soon as they get in and they're on the bus, they're taking selfies and sending those downrange to the village, and the village is emptying out, saying we're going to do that too.
Todd, we're getting some questions from folks that are watching this. So we're talking with Todd Bensman again. I encourage you to go to CIS.org, Center for Immigration Studies. A lot of what Todd writes what he writes is posted there, as well as his colleagues. A couple of questions people got. One, I got a text on here from one of the viewers. If the states on the border wanted to, could they build a border wall? I mean, could Texas just build the wall themselves? I mean, some of these places have enough money. We just threw $40 billion at Ukraine. I think the border wall was going to cost 10, but could Texas just build their own darn wall?
Texas is building its own darn wall. Okay. They actually are. They're building, it looks just like the Trump wall. It's a 30-foot tall, it's panels just like Trump panels, but they're also building kind of cheaper chain link, barbed wire topped, razor wire topped fencing. I mean, it's something. I mean, you can defeat that thing, but the trick is that the state can only build on private lands where the property owners have said, okay, we'll take it. Not all property owners are giving their permission, but lots of property owners are, and that wall is going up. I don't have numbers for you right now, but a couple of weeks ago when I was down there, I was all along that wall and the fencing, and I saw what they were doing. So they can build it, but there's going to be gaps still. There's still going to be some gaps.
Mason Mohon, one of our interns, he's a Hillsdale College senior, rising senior, is with me. Mason, you have any thoughts or questions for Todd?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Bensman. So I was born in Texas and raised in Austin, so immigration is very concerning for me, especially in Texas. And I was curious because I talk to people and they talk about like, oh, we just have to be nice and we have to care about these people because they're coming from tough situations, and only looking at that side of the picture. So what I was wondering about is, how should I respond to people that talk about that when they're justifying even illegal immigration and people flooding into the country?
No, that's a good question. I mean, listen, I don't blame a lot of these people for doing what they can to get through, to get into the country. I certainly understand it, but the answer to that should go along the lines of this: that we are a sovereign nation. And all sovereign nations throughout history, dating to ancient times, and all current countries across the globe now, expect to be able to decide who gets to come in and who doesn't at the citizens' discretion, not at the outsider foreign nationals' discretion. Nobody cedes that control to somebody else. There is a legal way to do this, number one. And number two is that the world is a poor place. I saw a study not long ago that identified 700 million people who are living in extreme poverty. At what point would people who are making the argument on the other side draw a line and say, here's how many we're going to take and how many we're not going to take? That's essentially what we all are doing. You have to make a decision about how many people you're going to let into your lifeboat, because eventually your lifeboat sinks. And that's an issue of sovereignty. You know, the citizens of this country, through elected representatives, Democrats and Republicans alike, have built a system of laws. We are a nation of laws. And if we just blow it off, then you don't have a country. I mean, you have to we get to decide who comes in.
Todd, can I parse that out in a different way now? You
Sure.
mentioned that if you want to come across, you have to pay $10,000 sometimes for the smugglers. And so what we know at the border, the Mexican border, correct me if I'm being too simplistic, but we know that the cartels control who gets in. And so they are letting in people who are advantageous to the cartels, meaning they pay $10,000. They are sex trafficked because that's valuable to the cartels. They carry drugs because that's valuable to the cartels, right? I mean, and what am I missing? I mean, the cartels aren't going, well, you know what? It looks like a family of five. They really want to work hard and they'll get to Austin and they'll be good people. No, the only reason the cartel, it's organized crime, is going to let someone through is one of the categories that helps them with what they're doing. So aren't we as Americans, by having this system, we're incentivizing drug dealing, sex trafficking, and smuggling for pay, which almost inevitably leads to 22 people dead in the back of a truck because it was 110 degrees sometime in the next 5 weeks, and other horrendous things, because it's not like you're paying $10,000 to a community bank, you're paying it to a cartel. What am I missing?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are many other reasons beyond just that, hey, this is our country and we have a border that we're supposed to be, we have a law that says we have to, but that is certainly one of them, is that, you know, by having policies like this, we're doing several things. One is that we're killing these migrants. These policies have blood on their hands. I've seen it. I've heard the stories just countless times. That the child, the family, the single individual died because they came here for Biden's policies, and that was the only reason they came. And so you're actually killing a lot of the migrants. Right now in this heat, I think we have like 22 dead in the last month or so, just like trying to get here from the elements. But the other thing is that we don't know who is coming. When you come by border uninvited, you're unvetted. We don't know who you are. The country that you came from doesn't have criminal records like Somalia, or we're just taking a chance that you're not a rapist in your home country, or a gang member or a jihadist or whatever that you did. We can't get records on most of these folks, and that's a major public safety issue. Is my name is Mickey Mouse. Trust me, I was persecuted. I want asylum, and then they're in, right, and they're in forever. And then, if I can just to your point, is this particular crisis is so enriching these criminal syndicates on the Mexican side that it is going to destabilize the Mexican government sooner or later. This is They're making more money on this human traffic now than they are on drug trafficking for the first time.
Wow.
They are making billions and billions of dollars. Some of them are just like, now the drug trafficking is kind of a side business, not the other way around. That's how many are coming. They are getting filthy, fabulously $1 billion rich on this. And
Todd Bensman is our guest. CIS.org. I encourage our collegians. You can go to that website. It's very, let's see how to say it. It's a non-hysterical, very smartly presented set of papers and facts and policy arguments. The Center for Immigration Studies does an important job. So Todd, can you give us a view of the future? Because even if the Republicans get control of the House and Senate, they can't get things signed by the president. So is the power of the current, the power dynamic of the current setup all in the executive branch? And therefore, are we looking at this incredible inflow of immigrants that are unaccountable, or at least likely to be uncounted? Is that going to go on for the next 2.5, 3 years?
Well, I'm not terribly optimistic. As you know, we've talked about this, about the the predicted Republican takeover of the House and maybe the Senate. I think it'll help, but ultimately, all power on this issue extends mainly to the Oval Office. That is the main control stick is in the Oval Office. So the Congress can do certain things if they get together and they will it. They could, negotiate a bill, appropriations for something that the Democrats really want, near and dear to their heart. They can hold hearings. They can do an impeachment if they want. I hear a lot about impeaching Mayorkas. They can kick up some policy trouble and maybe some leverage to get the Democrats to pull the stick back, to close it up, to end those incentives, to stop the selfies going back down trail. But short of the White House changing hands, I don't see it. I mean, if the Biden administration wants to keep this up, it's just an order from the White House that does it,
All right. Well, listen, Todd Bensman, one of the things that we do with these collegians, every year we find out that so many folks are searching for resources and voices they can rely on. So I vouch for Todd Bensman a lot, and CIS.org. His book is right here, by the way. It's called America's Covert Border War, The Untold Story of the Nation's Battle to Prevent Jihadist Infiltration. Our enemies, our real enemies, are happy to have an open border where they can send people in. Lord knows they could be spying, they could be bombing, they could just be undermining us. They could do lots of things. It's an important book. So thank you, Todd, as always. And I will encourage people to use you as a resource. You don't have anything else to add, do you?
No, thank you so much.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks, Todd. We appreciate you very much.
Thanks for having me. Happy to do it.
All right, everybody. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we got Congressman Thomas Massie. Congressman Thomas Massie. Don't forget our quote, "The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It's to the vigilant, the active, the brave." And be vigilant, active, and brave on your college campuses. Thank you, Mason, for being here. We'll take a break and be back in just a moment with Congressman Thomas Massie. Be right back.